Okay, gang, part 2 of chapter 35, Nationalism. We noted in the previous segment, arising in India, China, and Japan. Also, in this case, Africa. Colonials will participate in World War I. The elite of African colonies will seek independence. A lot of colonials from African colonies, the British and the French colonies, would participate in World War I as soldiers, as porters carrying stuff in the war into the war zone. They're going to want to be free and independent after World War I. They're not going to get it. To give away the story here, they're not going to get it until well after World War II. But there is this drive for independence from the metropole or the mother country. In Latin America, different story. Latin America not claimed by the United States. We didn't have official colonies in Latin America. I think some people would argue with that, looking at places like Guantanamo or even Puerto Rico. But the United States will control vast swaths of Latin American economies. Africa under colonial domination, okay, colonies are pulled in. War was actually fought in the German colonies when the French and the British take control of the few German colonies in Africa. Subjects of colonies in Africa would be sent to France to fight on behalf of the British or the French, or to, again, work as porters, carrying stuff like ammunition on the front lines. Uprisings in the colonies for independence were crushed, okay, after the war. Something similar, by the way, will happen in Ireland. That's a totally different story. And resentment will linger. Okay? The colonial economy will not be self-sufficient. The British and the French are not in the mood to give African colonies their freedom when they, in many ways, felt that those colonies had saved them from defeat by Germany. That without those African colonies and men, material and men, they might have lost the war. So, these colonies' economies will be set up by the metropole, the British and French, for export, extraction, food and raw materials out, and manufactured goods in. It won't be set up for African peoples to make a lot of their own stuff and manufactured goods. And in fact, very harsh labor practices will be used. So again, the African peoples, different colonies would hope to be rewarded, but they won't. Okay, this Western educated elite. Imagine this: you're in a French colony like Senegal, and you're going to school. You're upper class Senegalese, and you're speaking French and learning about liberty, equality, fraternity. Right, these great things out of the French Revolution, but you have none of them of your own. Right, you begin to wonder why. Europeans will actually tighten control after World War I. And peoples in Africa will begin to search for their own identities. The boundaries, the borders drawn by the Europeans often made no sense to the people on the ground. Okay? Ethnic groups could be divided, where the British and the French colony line went right through the middle of an ethnic group. So suddenly, people who had been related by language and ethnicity grew up speaking French or English. Not the same, right? French on one side, English on the other. Okay? So the colonial boundaries, which in many ways become national boundaries today, were not drawn, by and large, by the peoples of Africa. They're drawn by the foreign powers. In Latin America, we will see the rise of reaction to NeoColonialism. So these nations were mostly independent by the 1820s, right? But foreign powers, namely the United States, would dominate them economically, and when those economic interests were threatened, the United States often would send in the military to places like Nicaragua, the Honduras, Santo Domingo, okay, Haiti. So what do? Educated, especially young college students in Latin America would turn to ideologies like communism. Lenin had spoken against anti-imperialism. So we can trust the Russians, like, would be their thinking. The Russians give us training and even weaponry. We go to Moscow and learn how to be good communists. We can use communism as a tool to fight against the American imperialists. Right? So we universally protest against American neocolonialism. But as they invited the Soviets in, I mean, the Soviets wanted to stay. There was Soviet imperialism would replace American neocolonialism. So we'll see the rise of communism in some of these places. Take a look at a map like this. Google one if you don't have your textbook. United States troops in Haiti, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, a colony of the United States, Guantanamo Bay here in Cuba, American troops in Mexico, Nicaragua, as they said, Venezuela, time and time again. The Americans largely engaged in what's called dollar diplomacy. William Howard Taft, who followed Teddy Roosevelt into the White House, called for investment in Latin America and would support American businesses when those investments were threatened. Okay? So American economies were tied to the United States. American companies controlled entire sectors of Latin American economies, such as United Fruit Company might go into your country and say, you can only grow bananas. Yes, I'm exaggerating. You have to buy the rest of your food from the United States. Okay? You can't just live on bananas, believe me. Okay, try it. These nations will be hurt badly during the Great Depression when the United States curtails its importation of bananas and coffee and pineapples and other agricultural products of Latin American countries. Thereafter, some began to focus on domestic development, especially with the ascension of the presidency of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who would call for a good neighbor policy. As Roosevelt kind of looked across the horizon and saw the Nazis rising in Europe and the militarists rising in Japan, he did not want potential enemies to the southern border. So he called for a good neighbor policy. When American oil interests in Mexico lost their rights to Mexican oil, basically they're sucking oil out of the ground in Mexico, polluting Mexico and not paying the Mexicans anything. Maybe some corrupt Mexican officials, yes, but the Mexican people are losing out. Oil's being sucked out from underneath them. When the people of Mexico took over their own oil industry, the companies of the United States appealed to Roosevelt and said, hey, send in the troops. We're losing our oil refineries, our oil wells. And Roosevelt basically said, look, you got what, you made profit for a long time. Let the Mexicans have their own oil companies, their own refineries and wells, their own oil fields. So he wanted Latin American support as World War II loomed. Thus, the good neighbor policy. We are going to move into the war next time, chapter 36, World War II, global conflagration. Okay, we've previewed it here, unfortunately. We'll also get into some documentary material I will post from PBS series, People's Century, okay, World War II. Right? See you next time. Stay clamped down, stay safe, and stay healthy. See you.